Well, we're really lucky today to have our guest speaker with us, the Washington State Attorney General Bob Ferguson. We're really pleased to have you here. Thank you very much. A short intro on Bob. When I talked to the folks at your office, they said, keep it short, keep it short. So I will, but when I was reading your bio the other day, there were some really cool things that I just didn't know about. So those we're definitely going to bring up. But Bob is our state's 18th Attorney General. And as the state's chief legal officer, Bob's committed to protecting the people of Washington against powerful interests that don't play by the rules. He's a fourth generation Washingtonian. Walt, listen up, a graduate of the University of Washington.
Go dogs.
Go dogs.
He and his wife have twins. That's got to keep you busy. Jack and Katie. Bob has hiked hundreds of miles of Washington trails, and he has climbed many of the state's highest peaks. He's summited the highest points in 45 of the 50 states in America. Very cool. Bob is also a internationally rated chess master and has twice won the Washington State Chess Championship. Congratulations, that's impressive.
There's a lot of you.
Yeah,
We don't know.
that's awesome. So with that, I'd like to welcome Bob Ferguson.
Thank you. Well, thanks for having me. Thank you all for having me this morning. Really appreciate it. Thanks for the introduction. It's great to be with all of you. I actually stayed in town. I live in North Seattle. As Mayor Ken knows, my wife and I and our kids live in North Seattle. So drove out last night, stayed in Hampton as well as close by. No traffic issues this morning. And so I'm going to just talk a little about the office, what we do, maybe a couple issues we've been working on lately. But really, I'll leave most of the questions. Ask about whatever you want. I mean, feel free to ask about the issues I talk about, but there's a lot going on. Feel free to ask about anything that comes to mind. I'll do my best to answer them. So first I should mention this is my 157th Rotary Club meeting that I've been to. So that's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot. So I'm not a Rotarian myself, believe it or not, but after I got elected Attorney General, I was invited to speak at a Rotary Club meeting. So I went and I really enjoyed it. Chance to get out of the office and interact with the people that I represent, of course. And as you sense from the introduction, Roy, I like lists, right? The highest peak in all 50 states. I took a trip to see a Major League Baseball game in every Major League stadium. I'm kind of oriented that way, so I thought, well, I'm going to try and get to every Rotary Club in the state. That was before I knew there were 185, so there's a lot of them. But I really like it for a lot of reasons. One, it forces me really to get right out of the office to every corner of the state. Tomorrow I'm going to be, where am I going to be tomorrow? The Lake Stevens Rotary, I think, is tomorrow morning, for example. I think last week or the week before, I was at the Grand Coulee Rotary and the Colfax Rotary. So one thing I've learned a lot about Rotaries in that time, but the main thing is, that I've taken away from it is that I discovered all Rotaries, in some respects, are in the same business that everybody in my office is in, which is every Rotary Club is very service-focused, public service-focused on their community. That's what I've discovered. They're interested in helping kids with scholarships to college or the homeless population. Whatever the issue is, it may be a little bit different from Rotary to Rotary, but they're very community-focused, service-focused. And take my word for it, everybody who works in my office, and there's a lot of people working in my office, we're the largest law firm in the state, they're community-focused as well, they're service-focused as well, because everybody can make more money working at a private law firm than my office. Take my word for that. Many of them could make a lot more money working at a private law firm, but they choose to work for a lot less money because they're interested in service. Service to their community, to the state, to our state clients, and that's something I think Rotaries and actually the employees in my office share. So thanks for having me for my, I think, 157th Rotary. I'm getting close to the end, and but it's been a lot of fun getting around to all of them. A couple things I should just mention about the office, give you a sense of the office before I maybe touch on a couple issues. So I think I mentioned we're the largest law firm in the state of Washington. We have more than 600 attorneys. We have more than 500 professional staff. We have 13 offices all around the state. It's a big, big operation. Think of our work in two buckets. The biggest bucket, most people who do the work, is we're the law firm for the state of Washington. So that means we give legal advice for every state board, commission, and agency, of which there's more than a couple hundred. Some of those are huge. Department of Corrections, right? Just to give legal advice to the Department of Corrections, you can imagine that's a big, big operation. And of course, the governor, the legislature, statewide elected officials. So we're just a huge law firm. So in that work that we do, we are in the role of giving legal advice to the state, whichever state client that is, but those state clients make the decisions. So if we're giving advice to the Department of Corrections, we don't make the decision. The head of the Department of Corrections makes the decision, right? That's how it works. It's no different than any business CEO who's got a law firm that gives them advice. The CEO, she or he decides what to do, the lawyers give advice. And she decides, oh, I'm gonna do X or I'm gonna do Y. Our role is give advice, they make the decisions. And that's the bulk of our work. The other piece of our work, which is still significant, although smaller in terms of number of bodies, but still a lot of folks, but tends to be more in the news more frequently, is work we do directly on behalf of the people of the state of Washington, where the people are the client. So think areas like, and I'll touch on a couple issues, like consumer protection, huge one, civil rights, antitrust, criminal justice, anything at the national level, if we have litigation against the administration, all those are my decisions. I'm not calling up the governor or the head of Department of Corrections or any agency head to ask permission whether to file a consumer protection lawsuit. If I think it's the right thing, we do it. If I want to settle the case, I decide that. If we're going to trial, I decide that for all those cases. And I do for all those cases, big or small, I make those decisions in all of them. So that tends to be pretty high profile work. To give you a sense of the work, sometimes people often say, and I sense when I say, hey, we have more than 600 attorneys, I can see people like, my God, what the hell are all those people doing, right? So to give you just one example, not to give you some, but one example of the largest body of work that we do is the state legislature back in the 1970s passed a law that made the AG's office in charge of an important body of work, and that is that in our state, unfortunately, children sometimes have to be removed from a home because of abuse or neglect. You can imagine these are really challenging cases for all sorts of obvious reasons. This is why, in large part, we have 13 offices all around the state, because we need to have a presence in every county courthouse across the state, because these cases happen all over the state. 100, more than 100 now, I think, of the attorneys in my office, that's all they do, which gives you a sense of scale of a lot of problems. That's a societal problem that we have, right? And those 100 attorneys, I went to the legislature last year asking for more resources to do the work because their caseloads are far higher than what is recommended for handling cases of that sensitivity and importance for those kids. So we're in the courtroom essentially as the advocate for the child when there's abuse or neglect. And we have a professional staff team that supports that work. So that's literally 1 out of every 6 attorneys walk in the halls of our office. That's all they do. And the legislature mandates that we do it. Okay, so the other thing I'll say about our office is every AG office is a little bit different. The AG's office in Washington, I don't want to say is unique, but maybe a little bit unusual compared to most other offices, that no attorney can work for the state unless they're reporting to the AG. In other words, Department of Corrections doesn't have their own attorneys who report to the head of the Department of Corrections. In other states, it's often the way it works. So the attorneys for the University of Washington or Washington State, all the attorneys for the state, they work in my office and report to me, ultimately, right? And we think that was passed back in the 1940s, I think, in Washington State, and I think that's helpful because what might be good for the Department of Corrections might be bad for another state department. And you want to make sure that there is single advice going out, or once in a while there can be a true conflict between 2 state agencies, and we have to navigate that. Create a screen and have some folks over here and some over here, and they're not communicating. So it's important for us to represent all the state. So every lawyer who works for the state, if they're signing documents, they have to report to the AG's office. So it's a big, it's a big operation. In doing the work that we do, when we have an annual retreat for all the new attorneys that join the office. I go to it every year. I give a talk to all those new attorneys, and every year I emphasize one core trait that I expect all of them and myself to have, which is independence. In the work that we do, we defend and enforce Washington state law. I'm confident everybody in this room has plenty of state laws they strongly disagree with. I'm no different than that. My team is no different than that. There are initiatives passed every year that I'm like, I voted against that thing. I hate that idea. Well, guess what? If there is a lawsuit challenging that initiative, guess who gets to defend it? That's our job, and we do it to the best of our ability. We put our best lawyers on it. We're going all the way to the state Supreme Court if we need to. We take that role very, very seriously. So that independence, makes the job interesting in many senses, and that is something that's served our office well. Just to give you an example, after I became Attorney General, I followed Rob McKenna. He and I are different political parties. I've known Rob a very long time since college. When I became Attorney General, I asked all of his deputies, these are the top 5 attorneys in the office, to oversee all the divisions. So their offices are right next door to mine, right? They're the top folks in the office. I asked all of Rob McKenna's deputies to stay on and serve as deputies under my administration. I can assure you it's unusual, right? Typically you come in a statewide office, especially if you're replacing someone different political party, you change out the top leadership. I did not know those people, but I knew they had a reputation for running a nonpartisan independent law firm. So I asked them to stay on, they all agreed. What I found out later on is when Rob followed Chris Gregoire as Attorney General, they're different political parties, he had asked all of Chris Gregoire's deputies to stay on under his administration. So there's a fellow who retired last year, I think it was, his name's Rob Costello. and he had served as a chief deputy under multiple AGs of different political parties. I'm willing to wager a lot that that's not just unusual around the country, but that is truly unique, that no AG's office anywhere in the country could say they had someone operating at that level of an office, of a deputy, under multiple administrations of different political parties. I have no idea what Rob's political orientation is. I mean, sometimes you get a sense just from conversations, but never asked, don't care. That guy knew how to run some big divisions, right? He knew state government. And that's a good thing about our office. Many AGs, when they come in, they don't just fire the top folks, they fire the line attorneys doing the day-to-day work of the office, which would be unthinkable in our office. That doesn't mean everybody agrees with my decisions or Rob's or Chris Gregoire's, but I want you to know the person who runs my consumer protection division, big division, impacts a lot of entities around the state, was hired by Rob McKenna. She's still there doing her work. I'm confident she'll be there after I'm gone as Attorney General. It's a professional operation. These are professional people, career people, and we take that role really seriously. I mentioned consumer protection. Maybe I'll focus on that just for a second because we receive around 20,000 consumer complaints a year. It's a lot, maybe more than that now. We enforce the State Consumer Protection Act. It's an act that was passed in 1960 or 61. It's pretty straightforward. It says you cannot engage in an unfair or deceptive business practice. Pretty straightforward. We enforce it. We think that's important for consumers, so they're treated fairly in the marketplace, of course. We also think it's important for businesses that play by the rules. If you're playing by the rules, you should not be at a competitive disadvantage to a competitor who's not playing by the rules. Level playing field for everybody. So, those cases, some can literally involve only a handful of consumers. We've had a case that involved one consumer. And we have had cases that involve literally hundreds of thousands, millions of consumers. To give you an example of a larger case, we just finished, maybe a month or so ago, a multi-week trial against Comcast. Most of our cases don't go to trial, but the case against Comcast did. Long story very short in this case, which is complicated, but the essence of our case was, you get your cable bill sometimes. If you're anything like me, you look at the bottom, you see all these fees and taxes tacked on at the bottom. And sometimes you look at something and say, what the heck is that service protection plan for $5 a month? What is that thing? Did I sign up for it? What is it? Well, we receive consumer complaints from people saying, hey, I never signed up for this service protection plan for $5 a month. Or I told them I didn't want it, and it's still on my bill. So we did an investigation. Turned out those consumers were right. They hadn't signed up for it, or they specifically said they didn't want it. In fact, we got a hold of, from our subpoena, more than 1,000 phone calls between Comcast representatives and Washingtonians. By the way, these are calls in which Comcast said, these are the calls where people signed up for this plan. They use this as their defense. Hey, this is the evidence, right? In more than half the calls, the service protection plan either never came up at all, and it was added to their bill, or the consumer specifically said, when asked if they wanted, said, no, I don't want it, and it ended up on their bill. So we went to trial. They sent out an army of DC lawyers, as you might imagine. We won. This judge said that Comcast had violated our Consumer Protection Act 455,000 times. That's a lot, by the way, in case you're wondering, that's a lot. We think that it's got to be a record. We just don't know of any other case that's ever been like that before. So the judge issued a penalty of about $10 million. That penalty amount goes to the state legislature, the general fund, to use in whatever way they want. Our Consumer Protection Division's a rare thing. It's actually a moneymaker for the state. It sends millions of dollars, tens of millions, to the state. Consumers receive many tens of millions of dollars more, and recoveries completely fund the entire operation. With the 30 attorneys, the support staff, all the experts we need, the office space, the computers, the whole thing. So in that case also now the judge has to, it's going to be complicated, but the judge has to, is going to provide restitution, order restitution for all the consumers who had to pay this $5 a month. It's a lot of consumers. I'm confident someone in this room will get a check from our office or from Comcast saying, hey, here's your $50 for paying $5 a month for 10 months. It's a lot of consumers impacted. That'll be millions of dollars more. So when people say, hey, what are all those lawyers doing? Well, 100 of them are advocating for kids in abusive homes, and 30 of them are taking on entities like Comcast at no cost to taxpayers. Maybe the last thing I just will mention briefly is a huge issue that we've been involved in, particularly on the litigation side, is the opioid epidemic. I won't go too much into this, but happy to take more questions. But just give you a sense of scale, in Washington State, 2 people die every day of an opioid overdose. So just be clear, that's not have an overdose, they die because of the overdose. We see this, your local elected officials, I'm sure, grapple with this, law enforcement grapples with it. It's just, in the education system, I was talking to a local school superintendent who talked about the impacts of opioids in the classroom. In those abuse and neglect cases I just was talking about, we asked our team, how many of your cases do opioids play a role in why there's abuse or neglect? And the answer came back 50%, half the cases. So it's a huge societal problem on many levels. We have litigation, I won't go into details, against a number of entities that we believe fueled the opioid epidemic. One is against Purdue Pharmaceutical. They're the manufacturer of OxyContin. We believe they were deceptive in how they advertised, promoted, sold OxyContin. It's a highly addictive opioid, as you may know. We go to trial against Purdue Pharmaceutical in February, just right in downtown Seattle. That's like tomorrow in litigation terms against Purdue. For Purdue Pharmaceutical, this case is existential. What we'd be asking for is for the harm that they did. These are major, major cases of huge impact. The other thing I'll mention about opioids is there are enough opioids prescribed in our state for every man, woman, and child, so including my son and daughter who are 11, for every man, woman, child have, I think, a 27-day supply of opioids. That's a lot of opioids out there in our community. And so we have litigation against 3 Fortune 15 companies. These are big companies, to put it mildly. And they are distributors of opioids. And they do exactly what it sounds like. When an order comes in from Snoqualmie or North Bend, right, order comes in, they ship the opioids. They have a legal duty if they see a suspicious order not to ship the opioids and to notify the authorities. Okay, so if you see a smaller community and suddenly a huge spike in opioid orders, and they say, oh, wait a second, that looks strange, right? There are only so many people live in that town. What's with all these opioid orders? They got to notify the authorities and not ship. These 3 entities ship so many opioids, just to give you a sense of scale, that in more than a dozen counties in Washington state, they ship more opioid prescriptions, not pills, more prescriptions than there are people in those dozen counties in Washington state. You tell me if you think they were ignoring red flags or not. Or if they just thought, hey, you know what? Let's not count the cost. Profits are good, ship those products. It's the latter, I can tell you. So these are huge cases for us, very time consuming. So again, if you ever wonder what our attorneys are doing, well, there's a whole lot of them who are doing that work, and that's extremely time consuming. It's all they're doing to hold them accountable. The goal of this litigation is a resolution or a trial result that any recovery we get, that money's going right back to your local mayors, right, to grapple with the issues that are going on, whether it's Snoqualmie or North Bend or downtown Seattle or Benton County or Spokane. Believe me, I go all around the state. It's an issue everywhere. To grapple with, hey, we need more funding for treatment. We need more funding on dealing with homelessness. Criminal justice system is impacted by this. It's a huge thing. We need more resources. So I'm going to stop there. I've gone on too long. And happy to take any questions you have about those issues, or really anything else. Go right ahead.
Back to the opioid
Yeah.
issues. Anything? Well, you see the very big picture. I'm
Yeah.
wondering if there are things you can suggest to smaller community-oriented organizations like ourselves. You know, people who are involved and parents or family members.
Sure. So at the local level, I think there's a lot that folks can do at the local level, and also advocating for change at the state level, right? Everybody has a voice on this. So in no particular order, there's a lot, but I just would say a couple things. So one is that we think of Washington, I think, as sort of this very progressive state, you know, on the front end of things. To give you a sense of scale, though, when it comes to addressing the opioid epidemic at the local or state level, we, especially up until even just a year ago, laid far behind most states. I'll give you an example. Most states have adopted what's called pill limits, okay? Where if your child goes in to get his or her wisdom teeth pulled, they're 18 years old, do they need a 30-day supply of OxyContin? No, they don't. But there are no pill limits that say, hey, you only get a 5-day supply or a 3-day supply or a 7-day supply, barring ongoing acute pain like cancer, of course, exceptions there. Washington state has had no pill limits in place. Most states have those. Red states, blue states, Kentucky, New York, they know what's going on. They address those pill limits. We have not. I tried to go to the legislature to pass a bill to change that, had bipartisan support. Powerful lobbying interests worked against it, didn't pass. Frankly, having more voices from communities talking about the harms make a huge difference. Eventually, a version of it got through on a rulemaking process. I'll spare you the details. It's better, but still not where it should be. Number two, to give you an example, if I go in to see you and I say, hey, I got some pain, I busted up my knee, you as my doctor can go to something called the Prescription Monitoring Program. It's just a database. You can go to it. It exists. And you can see my history in getting opioids. So you can see if I went down the street to see Dr. Matt, right, to get opioids a week ago, and then the week before that I was in North Bend, right, with Mayor Ken, with Dr. Ken, right, Dr. Ken getting another group of opioids. Now you know I've got an addiction problem, right? You can see that. It's all right there. It's not some state secret. The information's all right there. Most states require you to check that before handing over the opioids. Washington state does not. What's up with that, right? The states that have adopted have seen a dramatic decrease in that number of opioids going out the door. Remember that 27 opioid supply that every man, woman, child has? This is a big reason why. I went to the legislature, again, asking them to require doctors to check the prescription monitoring program. Did not pass. Went through a different rulemaking process, sparing you a lot of details here. A version that got passed, but now I think it's on the second refill. They have to check it. It should be the first time in, right? It should be the first time in. So there are things, voices at the local level from folks who engage in this, but also engaging with your local leaders on prevention issues, you know, just education issues. I talk to my friends who have kids. I think they think, oh, that opioid thing is kind of somewhere else, right? Trust me, I've met with so many parents who have lost their kids, either physically, their kids have died because of their addiction, or they have lost them in a, you know, from a practice. They're not the child they were before,
Yeah.
right? They're not the child they were before. It's heartbreaking, and it transcends race, class, gender, rural, urban, does not matter. It's indiscriminate. So anything can be done on that standpoint. And there's a lot more if you want to chat more. I've got a lot of ideas, but there's a lot that at the local and state level that we can do to address it. That, just being candid, we're not doing. I hate to put it that way, but that's my view of it. Yeah. Yes.
Building on that.
Yeah.
The perception, at least maybe in the media, that all of this homelessness and drug addiction, the catalyst was the legalization of marijuana.
Yeah. No.
So if
Yeah.
that's not the case, then how do you reverse that? How do you educate the public on that?
There's no one I've spoken to who, just from my experience on these issues, who thinks legalization of marijuana is the issue. With homelessness, it's well documented, mental health issues, drug addiction of opioids, heroin, those type of issues are what's driving homelessness. And other economic issues that people have, job loss, you name it, right? I mean, those things are contributing, but no, legalization of marijuana, look, folks can have a reasonable policy discussion about whether that's a good idea or not, right? Our office is involved in that in certain ways, but no, I don't think there are sort of serious folks out there who think the legalization of marijuana has somehow done something for a homeless population. Do I think these other issues have been documented to be contributed? Yes. Having spent some time in local government on the King County Council, spent a fair amount of time working on homelessness issues, having spent time in my life before getting in politics with the homeless population, my direct experience on that as well as my sort of working as a politician is mental health is huge. It has nothing to do with marijuana. And also drug addiction, but drug addiction in terms of heroin, opioids, that type of thing is what's driving it. Yeah, and those are, look, homelessness, I had a long talk with someone yesterday, an elected official about it. It's, it's so challenging, as a lot of folks in this room know, because the issues are so complex. And the investment is so important in terms of housing, but this is a longer answer than you want, but I just will add briefly that, one homeless population that's gone down actually is the percentage of individuals who are homeless who are veterans. That's one area that we've made some improvement, in large part because, as Mayor Ken knows, folks worked at the local level. I was very involved in this, Mayor Ken and others, to put specific resources to addressing veterans and homelessness. Many veterans are homeless because they have issues related to their service, PTSD, for example. A lot of ramifications come from that. Well, get them the treatment they need to address those issues and some stable housing and some support services around that, and go to the underlying causes of what's going on, and that will help, as it has in King County, for example. Taking those ideas, that's just one idea local. Other jurisdictions have ideas. I think the state could use a homelessness czar, basically, someone who's just looking out across the state, seeing what ideas are working, what's not working, what's efficient, what's not efficient, and trying to address these, because it's got to be everybody, the local communities and the state to get together on this. Oh, Mayor, man, okay, this will be tough. What do you got?
Oh, no.
I'm ready.
I'm just curious, Bob, I know you're involved with the ACA issue.
Oh, yeah.
Can you speak to maybe I missed the news lately, but is there an outcome yet, or what's the status?
So good. So the mayor is asking about Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. It's been the news a fair amount lately because, as you know, the U.S. Supreme Court upheld Obamacare. It's been a number of years ago, 5 years ago, something else. Whatever, a number of years ago, right? It was a 5-4 decision upholding Obamacare. A number of Republican AGs challenged it. The Supreme Court upheld it. There's a new lawsuit brought by Republican AGs again challenging the Affordable Care Act, the constitutionality and legality of it. It was argued yesterday in the Federal Court of Appeals in the Fifth Circuit in New Orleans, specifically that part of the country is where it's being heard. 3-judge panel is looking at it. The sense of observers, I've not listened to the argument yet, but the sense of legal observers was that the court is likely to, based on the questions, that's always a risky thing to analyze that too much, but the court may declare Obamacare unconstitutional. Whatever the court decides, it's going to the U.S. Supreme Court, okay? I won't get too much sort of the legal details of the argument, but it'll end up before the U.S. Supreme Court. I anticipate a close decision at the U.S. Supreme Court. Justice Roberts almost certainly playing the decisive vote on on that case when it gets there. So what's happened is, while right now, while the trial court said it was illegal, Obamacare, the court did not put an injunction on the Affordable Care Act. In other words, the judge said, Obamacare is going to go on as it always has until this thing gets worked out in the courts, right? So the impacts for Washington would be significant if the Affordable Care Act was declared illegal or unconstitutional. We have about 800,000 individuals who would lose access to health care. That includes those with pre-existing conditions. That's just one statistic for you. So it's a big one for Washington State. Washington State, my office, were involved in that case, which is unusual in that it was a Republican AG suing the administration, right? Suing the federal government, saying that law is unconstitutional. So the state sued all the time over state laws. My job is to defend those state laws, whether I agree with them or not. I talked about that earlier, right? What happened here that was strange was when the federal government was sued on Obamacare, the federal government said, the Trump administration said, no, we're not going to defend it. So it's kind of strange. You got a lawsuit saying Affordable Care Act's unconstitutional, and the government, whose job it is to defend it, says, no, we're not going to defend it. So states like Washington went to the court in Texas and said, hey, we have a lot to lose if this thing's declared illegal. Will you let us come in and defend it because the federal government won't? And the court said, okay. So we're actually it's a strange situation. Washington State, my office, along with other states, are actually in court defending the Affordable Care Act and will all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. So we'll see what happens. The decision won't come from the Fifth Circuit, I'm sure, Mayor, I shouldn't say I'm sure, it's up to the court, but I'd be surprised if it came out anytime real soon. These things typically take a few months, sometimes longer. Depends if it's a split decision or unanimous, but I would expect it to be a few months before we get a decision, and then an immediate appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court based on whoever loses. We'll take it right up. Yeah. Mayor.
Well, the latest issue is the Oak Harbor noise case, and my first reaction
growlers?
to that was, sorry?
The growlers? The growlers, yes?
Yeah, the noise.
Yeah.
My first reaction to that is, oh my God, what will the Navy do if they're found to be liable, when they just pick up and move? So
Yeah.
can you talk about that a little bit, and
Sure.
is there a possibility of a settlement? That,
Sure.
we wouldn't lose the Navy?
Yeah, no, we're not going to lose the Navy. So the issue is on Whidbey Island. There are airfields on Whidbey Island, as there have been for a long, long time, as folks know. The Navy has a huge presence there. They have Growler jets, they're called. These are important for national security. These are jets that fly low. They jam enemy communications. So these are important for national defense. They've had, I think, many dozens of Growler jets there for some time. The issue is not about those existing ones.
Yes.
Right. So the litigation is not about the existing ones.
Okay.
Just to be clear, right? So we're not challenging the 88 or whatever number that they've got. They've got a large number of Growler jets who take off every day and do their thing. There's no legal challenge about that. The legal challenge is about the expansion of that program, adding another few dozen Growler jets. Specifically, what is that? This goes for the Navy as it goes for any entity, is if you are making changes like this that can impact human health or the environment, there's a whole lengthy there are federal rules you've got to follow before you do that. Analysis, studies, potential mitigation you might have to do if there's any impacts on wildlife or human health, right? If you talk to anyone who would be Highland, these Growler jets are allowed, to put it mildly. That's what they're designed to be. I've talked to many folks there who say these have huge impacts on their life. So again, to be clear, the existing one, they have problems, concerns with, but what the issue is this growth. And they feel that this growth, they did not go through the right legal process. My team's looked at this for a long, long time. We came to the conclusion that they did not follow the right process. So the claim is, hey, you didn't follow these processes, you've got to go back and do that again. You know, I filed now 41 lawsuits against the administration. We've won 21 cases, we've lost none. I don't bring cases unless I think we're going to win. And I don't go around suing the Navy just for the hell of it. My dad was in the Navy. In my office, I got a picture of my dad in his Navy uniform. So we're pretty serious about the Navy in my family, I can assure you. But the Navy's got to follow the rules, just like the mayor of North Bend, right?
Yeah.
Just like the mayor of Snoqualmie, just like me. Everybody's got to follow the rules. If you don't follow them, you're going to have a problem in my office. And so, do I think there's going to be a settlement? I don't know. I mean, often I say yes, but if you talk to local elected out there, and these are folks who support the Navy, you know, a lot of the feedback has been they don't feel the Navy's been a particularly good neighbor on this issue, the way they went about it. But I'm just giving you the feedback on it from what I hear. And so I don't know the answer. We're always open that most of our cases, in general, that we bring get resolved. But typically against the federal government, you know, the 21 cases we've won, those have not been settlements. We've had to go to court, get injunctions, get judicial decisions. So we don't bring unless we think we're going to win. That doesn't mean we're always going to win all of our cases, but we feel our case is strong. But we're always open, right, to a resolution with the Navy. But no, it doesn't mean the Navy's going anywhere. The case has nothing to do with the existing Growlers that have been there for a long, long time, of which there are many, or those ongoing, the
That
work
was
that they do.
clear reports that I heard.
Yeah, no, we're not asking for an injunction, putting a stop to it, for example, we're not asking for that, but we are saying you've got to do this, you've got to do an examination of the impacts. And specifically, if there are impacts, that still doesn't mean they can't do it, but then there are things like mitigation, where you fly, how often you fly, what time of day. They fly in the evenings after people have gone to sleep, for example. People are unhappy they're being woken up in the middle of the night with prowler jets flying over their homes, they're not happy about that. So that is something that, so just to be clear, one possible outcome is, hey, the court says, yeah, Ferguson, you're right, maybe you need to mitigate this. Doesn't mean you can't have them, even this expansion, but you gotta change how you do it. Time for one, you cut me off when you guys are out of time, you go right ahead.
Bob, maybe an issue that has more local impact here,
Yeah.
and statewide. I know you were involved with and were kind of vilified for, and that's the issue of fish culverts and the.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
SR 1899 corridor
Mhm.
or interchange out here, we suddenly had another $15 to $30 million price tag put on a $150 million project.
For the city,
For the state. I mean,
for the,
but
for the
that's-
state, sorry, yeah.
It's a critical project
Yeah.
for us, so that we've been working on for some time, and of
Yeah.
course, SR 18 itself, but just across the state, can you speak to that issue?
Sure.
And what was important, I love some of the editorials that you wrote about why you were trying to defend that issue in terms of
Sure.
kind of the sovereignty issues with
Sure.
tribes and how that.
Yeah,
And
big
what's the-
issue,
what's
so
the
it's,
steps?
yeah, I'll try and give a real short answer, but let me know when the meetings, I don't want to go on too long, but culverts, as many of you probably know, are designed to allow fish to pass through. As we do developments and roads, you want to find ways for fish to pass through. We build these culverts. We have a zillion culverts across Washington State that cost a lot of money to construct. There was a lawsuit brought by a number of tribes in Washington State back before I was Attorney General against the state, saying these culverts aren't working properly or are blocking fish passages, right, need to be replaced because it's impacting salmon runs. And the tribe said, hey, we've got a treaty right to salmon and these culverts are impacting those treaty rights. I'm oversimplifying a very complex thing in a very dramatic way, so my apologies, but that's the gist of the case. So when I became Attorney General, the case, we'd already lost, the state already lost the trial court, I think, I'm sure when I became Attorney General, so it was up in the Court of Appeals. A couple things I would say is that, you mentioned I got a lot of criticism for defending that case. That is true. Tribes are intensely unhappy with my decision to defend it. I work closely with tribes, but my job is to defend the state when the state is sued. Even if that means folks who are my friends or my political supporters are unhappy. That's the job. So that's number one. Number two is part of our legal arguments, and they were unhappy I appealed it all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. They said, well, you didn't have to appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court when you lost in the Court of Appeals. Well, that's true, but my job is to defend, right, the state, and if we feel we have good arguments, that's what we do. A couple of arguments, in no particular order of importance, there's a lot of them, but one is that, for example, that we said, well, look, yes, if these culverts are the problem, right, the problem is the way in which they were designed. And they were designed under specific instructions and requirements set by the federal government. The federal government said, hey, state, you gotta do these culverts this way. I'll spare you the whole backstory on that, but they were designed at the requirements of the federal government. To the extent those designs were faulty, we're saying, well, why are my taxpayers paying for that if they've got to be replaced? Why are you paying for that instead of, why isn't the federal government kicking in? And this is billions, this is a huge price tag, just want to be clear, huge price tag. Why are my taxpayers paying for that if that's the problem? Why isn't the federal government? So part of our claim was, hey court, if you think that's the problem, you got to bring in the federal government to pay for at least part of this, if not all of it. That's an example of what we're saying. Another thing was we said, well look, if you've got this problem with culverts, great, but everybody acknowledges, even the tribes, that a certain number of those culverts, I forget the percentage now, but it's a significant percentage of those culverts, even if you replace them, and the cost is tremendous, that you're all paying by the way, even if you replace them, everybody agrees, there is no debate that it'll make zero difference for salmon for those culverts. Now some will, you change some culverts, it'll make a big difference for salmon. But there is a big chunk of them that you literally change them for whatever other reasons. There's more blockage downstream, or there just aren't fish there, or whatever it might be, it'll make zero difference to salmon, but court orders are blunt instruments. It says, change them all. Doesn't matter. So you could spend those hundreds of millions of dollars to improve salmon runs in a far more efficient way, but the court order doesn't recognize that. So we challenged that part of it. We lost at the Supreme Court. It was a 4-4 split. One judge recused himself, so the lower court decision was upheld. So the state has to change all those. I might add that the state should have been changing out these culverts long before, right, to improve salmon runs, right, and might have avoided litigation by doing that. But now the court order is clear. The state has a deadline of, I think, 2029, I may be off by a year, to get all these culverts replaced. But the cost to taxpayers will be dramatic. Local jurisdictions, the county, for example, has many culverts more. they're gonna be on the hook, you know, it goes right on down. So it's a massive case, and look, I don't enjoy being in conflict with the tribes. I work closely with them, and many of them are still unhappy about my decision, but, you know, when I talk about independence of the job, it's easy to say, but then there's a time when I've got to deliver on that, and this was one where, you know, politically, if there's a lot of support, I lost because of that, but that's really not relevant to my decision. You know, my obligations to all of you, right, to the taxpayers, to the state, even if that's making some friends really, really, really unhappy. And that's what we did in that case. Yeah.
One principle in the heart of that case
Yeah.
that I'd love for you to speak
Sure.
to, but was the issue of kind of that, the sovereignty issue and how it risks kind of stepping over the line and starting to impede on local sovereignty of local government.
Oh, so yeah, I mean, there's huge issues. I mean, tribes are sovereign nations. I want to emphasize that, right? Tribes are sovereign nations. Fundamentally different than local government. They are sovereign nations. And so their sovereignty claims in court are often very powerful. They have strong treaty rights, which should be honored. But a concern that we also expressed in court was if the court agreed with the tribes that all these culverts had to be replaced, that the ramifications of that, the logic that goes into replacing those, right, to improve these salmon runs could impact local jurisdictions, county jurisdictions, the state, in all sorts of other ways that I think will happen. People may think that's a good thing, may think it's a bad thing, may be indifferent to it, but it was our argument that, hey, that the claims of the tribes, if upheld in that case, would have huge ramifications in areas outside of culverts as well. So the Supreme Court upheld it. It was, again, it was 4-4 split, but that upheld the decision. Look, is there going to be more litigation on these issues? Yes. There's been a lot of litigation with tribes in the state over many, many years. I'm not the first AG where this has happened, but we'll see where it goes from there. One last one, yeah.
When was the last chess tournament you played in?
The last chess tournament I played in, well, I haven't played in a chess tournament since I played after high school. I decided to become a professional chess player, so I didn't go to college right away, just played chess, went to Europe. And I still played a little bit up into my early 20s, then I stopped completely, and then I kind of came back for a little bit in my early 30s, so it's been maybe about 20 years. So I played for a couple years in my early 30s, that's been a full 20 years. So I love chess, but I just, you know, yeah, when I retire, that's when I'm launching my comeback. Hey, thanks a lot, you guys, appreciate it. Yeah. It's a deal. Thank you, really good. Yeah, thank you.
I